Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar is presented by Sports Field Management Association. Leading up to SFMA's annual conference, we will be hosting various webinars that preview conference education sessions. The 2023 SFMA conference takes place January 16th to 19th, 2023 in Salt Lake City, Utah. Registration is now open, so make sure to head over to the SFMA website to register for the conference. Our featured speaker today is Lorenzo Lopez, CSFM, owner of Southwest Sports Fields Mow. He will be presenting a preview of his conference education session, Robots in Sports Fields, Extending Your Crew with Automation. Attendees will be muted during the presentation. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature. Please type in your questions and Lorenzo will answer them at the end of the presentation. Thank you for joining us today. You can go ahead and get started.
Okay, thanks, Kristen. I appreciate this time. So this has been something that's been very interesting because there's 2 weeks when I was a senior in college where I don't know what it was, but I was contacting everybody with a mower that was made with red or green or orange and asking them if they're doing anything robotics, if they had any positions. Then didn't get much answer, so I just gave it up. But it's been fun to come back and work with robotics. My background is I was in Arizona, went to Arizona State, did grounds crew there, did grounds crew with the Arizona Diamondbacks, and then I moved up to the state of Utah. And there, I worked for the state and was also worked at 2 different universities there. And so that was a fun time being able to work with crew and grow up doing more and move up in my positions, helping out with grounds crew. But then from there, I've been doing sales for the last few years, and that's where I've been into consulting and doing nanotechnology and robotics. And this has been really fun. So I look forward to sharing more about robotics, especially as I've been seeing how people like you, groundskeepers, are getting a lot of help, especially with what we're going through when it comes to this shortage we're having on labor. Make sure we got this. Okay, so I wanted to think about back when you were a new grounds crew guy, and it's the morning, grounds crew person. It's the morning. You're sitting at the table waiting for your boss to come in, and he comes in and he says, you know what, we're going to switch. We're going to go from poly pipe, and we're going to go from rigid, hard, barbed connections, and we're going to go from steel connections to a white pipe that's covered with glue, liquid glue and liquid primer, and it's going to make it stick together, and it's going to hold all of our water and our irrigation. I know for a fact that I've met a few people who were there for the conversation, and they said it was an interesting conversation, but as a groundskeeper, I've learned to trust PVC, and there is a lot of values I like on PVC. Then 2 years later, he comes to you, and if those of you who don't know this, but over here on the bottom left of your screen, those are keys that we carry around to turn on these manual irrigation valves. And so they were in an irrigation box, but what happens there is we would go around and we all were required to go and turn these off and on, and these just did the same thing the electric valves do now, but you'll turn them off and on. I know a lot of people still have them, but I know a lot of people didn't trust these electric valves like what you're seeing on the right side, because it was new, it was different. And here's what the boss said is, we're going to put wires in our landscape to all of these irrigation boxes, and this is what's going to run it. And we go from this really hard, strong, sturdy gate valve to a valve that's electric, and it has rubber and it has springs, and it works a little bit differently. And of course, now I think we've all learned to love and accept, and we have electric valves as a big part of our life. Then, we all started working with electric valves. We had automatic clocks. And then these automatic clocks, we were told we're going to switch to master control system. And this is really happened to a lot of us here in the last, I say 10 years, where we have master control systems that are controlling all of our clocks. And, it's hard to always just trust a computer or your phone to run it all. But at the same time, when we learn to trust it, it's an amazing thing to be able to take care of all your zones. Versus, I remember driving around and we'd have to split up into 4 or 5, and we ought to go turn off those irrigation clocks because it was going to be raining. And then the next day in the middle of the summer, we have to go and make sure we don't miss any of those clocks back on. So these master control systems are amazing and becoming a lot and a big part of your guys' career. But just that same way, those innovations have really helped out a lot. So today we're going to talk about robot line painters and robot mowers. So they both have a huge value, not only just to helping your crew, but it also has a lot of value to your turf. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We're going to get more into the numbers of it and things to assist you on those side in January in Salt Lake. But for now, we're going to talk a little bit about them, answer some of those general questions. As I've been going around and meeting with guys, they all had questions, and I want to answer some of those basic ones, as well as let you see some benefits even beyond your crew that you're going to get help with. So here's the benefits of a robot mower. You're going to get consistent grass height. Your grass is encouraged to spread horizontally rather than vertically. You get thicker grass. You get the mulching action. You get less clip. You get less compacted soils. You get less weed pressure. You get a reduction of exhaust. You have reduction of fuel use. You have less manual labor involved, and you have something that's great if you have people asking you to do social media and public relations, because people do love these mowers. There's even one city that has already put googly eyes on it, and everybody loves it. It just kind of adds different. So when I first got in robot mowers, I thought we were going to have something like this, or we are just going to have a regular zero-turn mower that just drove around and just mowed everywhere on its own. Now that was, of course, the initial thoughts, not really knowing what it was going to be. But what really robot mowers are is something similar to this. It's because you want these batteries to last as long as possible, you need to make these. But we also realized if you don't need a seat, because you don't need a 200-pound person on top of it, if you don't need if we're using batteries, you don't need a gas engine, you don't need a fuel tank, and then think about it further. We don't need the big spinning rotary blade underneath there as well. And so this is common because the question I'll have is, well, how big is this robot mower? Because how's it going to finish apart? And this is where I'm going to kind of share, even though these are small, they can take care of quite a bit. Now, because we have made them smaller, you're also going to see, so this is a robot mower that's flipped over, and you'll see that there's a disc. And so from this disc, because safety is also the question we always get, are razor blades. Like, it's quite literally little razor blades that are underneath this disc, and as it spins, the disc pop out and it cuts. But you also see there's a big distance between where the blades come out and the edge of the mower. So all of these mowers have, at least all the ones I've interacted with, all have a safety feature where if they're lifted up, they immediately stop. They have a feature where if it's tilted, it immediately stops. And so it will keep everything underneath there and protect as much as possible. And again, you're going to have a good distance right there between just a safety feature there. Now, how this works, and this kind of helps explain how you get these benefits. So how these mowers get designed out in the field. So each mower has a different specification for how much acreage or square footage it will cover. And so you'll kind of assign this robot to a section or sections of grass to take care of. And what you'll put out there is a charging system. So I think initially people thought that the robots were going to just be taken out there with you each time, but they don't get taken out there with you. What happens is you leave them out there, and when they start, they mow, and when they start, the battery gets low, it goes and it parks itself on a charger, recharges itself, and it goes back out. Here's a picture of one in the field. This one is just getting prepped and getting ready to be put on there. And so again, you can see the grass and where the mower was going to mow, and then when it gets when the battery gets low, it comes back and it parks itself. So you do have multiple mowers, but it makes up for the difference as it takes care of itself. And here's where it really comes into assisting us. So here's our common mow schedule. So we have 7 days a week, and one of the days we mow. We mow for an hour, 2 hours, whatever it is. That's the only time we have it. So if you've had a big bump in rain that week, or fertilizer, or there's properly fertilized, or the season changed, this is when we get clipped, right? We were cutting off a lot, and now you have a big hedgerow of just grass clippings all over. This is also encourages things. So the one things we do know is, and all through SFMA conferences, the professors are always teaching, the more often you cut it, the better your grass gets. Sun Devil Stadium, we cut it once a day, and that's what makes it such a good carpet. We all have been to golf courses where we've been on awesome greens and tees where they're mowing them 2, 3, 4 times a day, and it's a really tight blanket of grass. So that's our common, but that's extraordinary, right? Well, our common mow schedule is this, but this is what we can do with our robots. So with robots, what we do is the robots will just sit there and mow. And so it does that mundane task for us, and it goes out and it mows. And the difference is we'll then add in blue irrigates. We'll put in time saying this is when it's irrigating, don't mow at those times. And then what you'll also tell the robot is, well, these are the 2 days that we have practices, or these are the 3 days we have practices, and these are the 2 days we have games. And so it also will put itself away and park itself on the charger during those times. And what that tells the robot is it can mow the rest of that time. And so the robot mower will go out and it will be mowing, and it will be doing all those things we've talked about. So it's mowed more often. You're going to start seeing it start to get a little bit tighter. You're going to not see any clip, and clip does start to create damage on the turf. And so if anybody has had it, we've all been in parks where we always see clip there, and it slowly gets thinned out. It slowly gets thinned out because it starts to kind of shade itself. Most of us, this is the sports field managers, we've all painted, and painting on clip is almost a waste because as soon as the wind comes in and blows it away, we get to lose those lines. But we also have those times when we're not mowing it to be thicker and it starts to thin out. This is when we start to get the increased weed pressure, disease pressure. We start to have a less consistent grass base because as it thins out, other grasses come in and they start growing it. And then that's when we start to get lawns and parks that are full of different types of grasses because things have gotten away. The other thing that's great about this is what happens on that mow schedule when someone's sick. A lot of times if enough people are sick, you just have to cut out areas and it might not get mowed for 2 weeks. It's taller. And then we start doing what we also learn at SFMA, which is we start scalping the grass. And now we've kind of shocked it. So in the same way, this is how the robots are able to help us do quite a bit more. Now, on top of that, we are talking about manpower as well, because manpower does go, I've already had conversations and a lot of people are having 300 plus hours a week that they don't have field laborers and assistants and ground crew to help out. And so we do have to find ways to make our life more steadily available to do those things that are more important. So now let's talk about the robot painters. So now the robot painters, the benefits they bring is they bring less wear and tear on your fields. They bring less weed pressure. There's less overseeding. There's less resodding. There's less cement or plastic or metal locators left in your fields. A lot of us will do that to try to find your corners. Less compacted soils. You're going to have a reduction of exhaust, reduction of fuel use, which those type of things are important for both these robots because both of these types of robots, because most of us are at cities or universities or school districts where they already have a goal to be carbon neutral by a certain date. So this helps us get there quicker. We know California's already put some bans on what you can be using out there on landscaping. And so these do affect us. And so this is a good answer. Again, robot painter, less manual labor involved. and it's even the less highly skilled labor has to be involved. Now that person who's your foreman or those, those higher end ground crew workers can be doing those other things for you instead of spending 3-4 hours lining out a field. And then again, great social media and public relations model. Like, people love seeing this going. So how they rethought the model on these. So again, battery power is what we're about. So it means we got to be lighter. So no more engine, no more gas tank. We do not have, these high pressure systems blowing paint into our soil. But these are lower pressure, but they still put out a beautiful line. And that's where they've innovated on the pump they use, and they've even innovated on the paint that they're using. So the paint's even more efficient and going further than they've gone in the past. So right here, this is a picture I took where it was a line painting robot in the back of a small hatchback, and this is a very small one, and it fit right back there, and the back row's still up, and it's just easy to lift in, lift out. So these are familiar parts. So like, they're not bringing us brand new parts to do these things. So now the robot painters are a little bit different. So where the mowers, we left them out in the field, the robot painters will actually stay with you, and you will take them to the site as you need to get them painted. Inside the robot, we're using pumps that are familiar to us. We're seeing some nozzles that are familiar to us. Even the cradles, like these are similar to what a lot of the cradles are that we used on our boom sprayers. These nozzles are similar to T-jet type nozzles. There have been some innovations, so there's some new nozzles out as well. And then the tablets, and they're using tablets that help run the robot, and so very, very similar stuff that we're all used to seeing and we're all used to doing. And now, because we do have a low pressure pump painting these, we can go do infills. I forgot how much we still are not painting the infills because those high pressure systems, as you spray down, it just disappears. And almost everybody's tried it, but this was actually done by a robot, and it makes a beautiful painted line. It cleans up just as well. But because it's low pressure, we're actually able to paint infills, which is a good advantage for now, especially as we're getting more tournaments going. It's a quick way to do multiple fields, or those fourplexes of softball fields or baseball fields. It's easy to move them around and do them between games, and you can even program it so it just does the infield. Doing artificial, it also does a beautiful line on artificial. So the yellow lines were done by the robot, and so it does a great line, keeps it straight. And again, the low pressure, now it gives us something that we haven't been able to do from before. And now here's where the real value comes. So we now have the ability to shift locations. Why would we not shift locations before? I mean, culturally, why did we mow once a day? Because culturally, we only could do it once a day, and it was a lot of stress on us to do it. Same thing goes for a soccer field. When we move a soccer field, we don't just move 1 or 2 lines to move a soccer field. You have to move all the lines. You move all the string you pulled for the penalty box, all the string you pulled for the goal box, the out of bounds, the circles, the arcs, everything has to get moved. So you shift a field 10 feet. It's not that simple. And we all know that we've done things to hide corners or to build corners, but this is even a simpler way, because the robot doesn't worry about those little landmarks. And so the robots will go out and just repaint these from the corners. And so if we switch, so I have one field paint highlighted yellow, but now, if I choose the one that's right next to it, underneath it, that's in white, it'll still move the mouth of my goal over 5 feet. Now, the best thing is when you actually shift it. So like the top mouth of those goals, that's going to be completely off. So as it wears, I can move it. And so as the robot goes out, because paint's still paint, it still lasts, 1 to 2 weeks. But when the robot goes back out there every other week, well, now you can just shift that field over another 10 feet and 10 feet. And now we're having less wear and tear. Another thing that we have seen with this was a high school. They're in a small town. They're a really good high school football team. They always practice on the lines. That's part of why they're good. Well, they always practice on the main field. because that's where the lines are. And so by the time they're in mid-season, the field is getting pretty beat up between games and practices. So now that they have a robot, they've gone out and they painted their practice fields. And when that starts to get beat up, they move. It's really easy for them to go and now build another field out in the baseball field. And so now they'll go out and they're practicing the baseball field while the practice field recovers. All this time, the game field's getting stronger and healthier and being able to prevent more weed pressure, be able to deal with the issues it needs to. The other thing that's great is in this situation, the ability to design your field layouts. A lot of times when we are out there trying to build multiple fields, people come to us saying, hey, just fit a field in here, fit a field in here. Well, this is exactly that scenario where this little field in the middle is one of their 5-year-old soccer fields. Just fit it in between those two fields. Well, it's nice to be able to use a scaled version and be able to create this field, copy and paste it from another one of their fields, pull it in here, and show there's no room between these two fields, which is great to be able to figure out in December and January rather than the week before all of soccer season starts. And so now we don't have to adjust. We've already worked it out. We've already found new fields for this little one, but it was an easy way for us to show where this needed to be designed. So that takes a lot of stress off us, but it allowed us to not try to shove a field in where there really wasn't one able to do that. And then the best part is also when we run out and you do a test with a robot. This, you can't see it here, but on this field here on the left, they aren't quite the same size because I found out that, on this bottom left corner, there was a cement baller that they had buried in the ground, but that's what they'd pull their strings to before the robots. And then, so we had to slide that field in to make it a little bit narrower. And same with the lengthwise. There's a bunch of irrigation valve boxes, which is why it's also a little smaller in that direction, because it was getting into those things. So it was really easy to adjust and adapt. Again, robots, you don't program a robot by saying go left after 60 yards and then go right after 10 yards. It's a pattern, and you're going to place a pattern and manipulate to what it fits for that part or that sports field. So again, I guess this is about that time. Yep. So there are quite a few questions. So if there's more questions you have that don't answer, I want to go more into case studies, return on investments, get more into some of those questions that I know people have asked, like, does the robot go over its own line? Yeah, it does. But it dries fast because it is a different type of paint. We're not putting out as much. It also dries a lot quicker. It doesn't cause as much of a problem. If you do have other questions that you have, please email me or give me a call. I would like to bring those up in January's conference. Equally, if you do have, if you don't want to wait that time, you can give me a call or email me sooner. Just ask me what questions you do have. I'd love to help out. And I think we do have a few hands raised. I don't know, Kristen, I don't want to screw up anything.
Well, usually if you guys could type your questions into the Q&A feature, we can ask those questions. But we do have a question here. Do the mowers, painters, etc. have the ability to tie directly into recreation scheduling programs yet?
I'm going to guess that's like probably like the recreations using that to like schedule other games is what my assumption is on that. And not as far as I know, do they tie together yet? Especially considering I don't know what the leading recreation program software is. We'd have to talk to some of the manufacturers to see if they are working with anybody, because it would be nice to be able to say that. But right now, what you would usually do is they still generally chunk it out. So I'm just like thinking of my local youth group, the youth soccer group. And, it's every Saturday mornings from about 8 to 2 in the afternoon. So we would just tell the robot, you can't be out there between 8 and 2 in the afternoon. And that would generally be how to do it.
Are there any robotic in-field grooming machines yet?
I have not seen one yet. That's a good one to bring up. But not yet. I'd say no. We do have robots that can go and clean up golf balls from a driving range, but I haven't seen it for a infield.
What are the best painting robots?
There's a few. Kristen, do we want to go into brand? I'm not required. I'm not allowed to do brand names. Do you want me to say anything or just keep it quiet for now?
Um, if you could give us, maybe are there like 5 that you could recommend?
The top two it's the tiny mobile robot and it's the turf tank. Those are the two leaders right now for sure. And those are the ones where they really are autonomous and they run themselves versus having to drive it or operate it somewhat.
How does this equipment do on rough or uneven terrain?
Yeah, so the mowers, I think it was one of my first pictures was it can go up a hill. So they have all-wheel drive robot mowers, and those can, let's see, where is it? They can go up pretty steep terrain. None of them do, but as far as line painters going up hills and or up slopes, that's not really what we're painting. So it's usually flat. So not too well. But if it's rough, as in like there's maybe it's got big sections of dead grass, the line painters do really well there, especially if you have one that has the bike tires. That one does really well over rough and sandy or thatchy, thick thatch grass, pine needles. Super simple. Hopefully that answers that.
What is the square footage mowed per hour per robot? What is the area capacity of each mower?
Oh boy, that's a good one. Each robot is built so differently. They have some commercial versions and some residential versions, and so they can do more than others. And that's where depend. It's good to know what your situation is, and then we kind of work it out. But there's quite a few. There's even ways that you can link a few robots together to cover the same sports field. And so there's really some great answers for us right now at sports fields, especially since a lot of sports fields are fenced off and flat. And so it's a really good scenario. And there's also robot mowers do have kits to do a lower cutting height as well.
Okay. If there is a malfunction with the mower, will you receive a notification?
Yes, yep. So if somebody even lifts it, somebody bumps it, it will notify you that something's happened. And most of these robot mowers do have apps for your phone, and so you get notified on your phone what's going on with it.
Are there any robotic string trimmers, or I'm guessing aerifiers is what someone is asking.
Oh, and aerifiers? No, not yet, not that I know of. Yeah, that is the one thing. So people are usually like string trimming. I mean, now you don't have to send your mow crew there, but you might have one person from your mow crew go by that area, depending on what's tolerable, but maybe every other week, let the edges grow a little bit longer and then they'll go and just mow the edges. Now that's where we can also get into the design of the field. There are ways to design your grass so the robot can mow all of that edge as much as possible.
Okay. What is the pricing for a robot?
It does vary depending. There are some different systems, and we'll talk about that more in January. I would glad to give you some ideas on which one it is. It changes. And for line painters, you're looking from about 23,000 to upwards from there for a line painter. Vandal resistant are the units. There's GPS location with it, and so I was working with some other people, and we had a robot taken. And I think it's just a matter of time before they're kind of like those Lime scooters that people leave out there. They were kind of messed with for the first little bit, but then once they see them, they just kind of quit messing with them. But they do have a GPS unit, and so the sheriffs went over and knocked on the door and said, well, we've been told there's a robot mower over here. And they said no, and then an hour or two later, the robot mower showed up back on the grass. So they're pretty resistant, as well as the manufacturers are doing good to, if it gets reported stolen, then it's now shut down. Like anybody turns it back on, the manufacturer will see it. How long does it take for a mower to mow 2 acres? It really depends on that mower type. Let's see, I'm trying to do it as I scroll in. The lowest mower robot can cut, if I remember right, it was just over a half an inch, between just about, I think it was like 0.6 inches. So just under 3/4 of an inch with certain robots as the mowing height you could do. Was low, how long is the typical runtime? It depends. The typical runtime for these robots, it changes, and that's why we just leave a charger out there. It'll go and take care of itself. Do the mowers run off of satellites? They are, more and more. We have robot mowers that are going to start working with RTK and GPS, and we didn't get into all of that, but yes, they are starting to do that more and more. Mow an acre, again, that depends on the mower. They can be programmed to mark hazards on a golf course? Yeah, definitely, if you have the same hazards, you can actually have them paint the same geometry line. So if it's a dash line along something, there are ways to make marks of such things as hazards. What are the costs of leasing software for robotic machines? So they should usually include the software for robotic machines. So like the apps come with the robot mowers, and the tablets show up with the line painters. And so you don't really have to lease the software. You shouldn't need to lease any software. It should be coming with the robots you get. The maximum width, I want to say there is one, and it feels like it's close to 36 inches right now. And again, that's a common question. How big is it? Well, you know what? It's not worried about getting it all done in an hour. It'll get it done maybe once or the entire part done once or twice in a day, each day per week. So, but yeah, so they're not too big. I've yet to pick up a robot mower that I couldn't pick up. So, and I don't have big arms, so I'm sure it's not too wide.
All right. Well,
any other questions?
Yeah, Lorenzo, if you want to pull up your contact information again,
Yeah, I'll do
share
that
with attendees.
And while I talk about that, yeah, what is the blade maintenance on these machines? Depends on the grass you're in. That's probably the biggest thing, but you're looking usually to get it, replace them, every 3 to 6 weeks. And like I said, they're razor blades with a screwdriver, and the batteries are still batteries. Protect them in the winter. We see that they're kind of like most batteries. If you can keep them out like the cold, at least bring them in for the winter. They tend to last a lot longer. But a few years generally you'll get for sure with these batteries. Can a robot mower stripe a pattern in ball field? I'm trying to think. I'm like, I mean, I guess if you, I don't think it could do a pattern necessarily, but if you mean, when you say a ball field, are you talking about the outfield of a grass? I'm thinking infield, so let's leave out the infield. So there are now mowers that are going to be able to do patterns. And so we can start to do different patterns in those ball fields. Okay, outfield, yep, perfect. We can. There are mowers that are coming out that we can stripe patterns in ball fields. Yep, it's pretty good. Rear roller, it's more on the mow pattern right now. I don't believe they have rear rollers on them as of right now. That's a good question for me to have answered. But yeah, if you drag something, it'll definitely make more of a line for sure. I think that's it. I can't think of anything else. I just trying to remember if there was anything else that we saw. Blade maintenance, ball field. Yeah, perfect. I think we got through all those questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm looking for more of those questions. I'd love to help you out. Oh, sorry, I didn't get all the way to my right there. Okay, so there's my contact info. Feel free to give me a call. Email me if you have questions. Those were good questions. Those were much more in depth than I was ready for, so I liked it. Yeah, anything else, let me know.
All right. Well, thank you, Lorenzo, and thank you all for joining us today. Again, this presentation will be featured at SFMA's annual conference, so come prepared with more questions. We do hope to see you in Salt Lake City. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of the week.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.